It seems that brokers see independent dispatchers as competitor because their pay percentage is way higher than independent dispatcher. An independent dispatcher can work with shippers directly on behalf of a carrier and cut out the broker who's making the most percentage. Most brokers, they don't consider independent freight dispatchers as competitors. And then there's some regulations I'll be sharing with you. And then the second part here is brokers making the most percentage, but not the independent freight dispatchers. Even though independent freight dispatchers can represent owner-operators and carriers, representing these people, meaning using their MC and going after the shipper saying, hey, we want to eliminate the broker and we want to work with you directly. I think the goal should be, don't think that there is a competition between broker and independent freight dispatcher. There are a couple brokerage companies out there that they are against independent freight dispatch, but it doesn't mean that all the brokers that are against independent freight dispatchers. Maybe you come up with article, blog post, or maybe you were looking for how to become independent freight dispatcher. And you see there's a post talking about independent freight dispatchers. They do business illegally. There are some brokerage companies that less than 1%, but majority of brokers, they don't think, this way. So I'll be talking about the independent freight dispatching business model, why it's important. If you want to go into being an independent freight dispatcher, you will understand how this independent freight dispatching service business operates so that you can declare to your state. And by the way, quick mighty disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. This is just, it's not a business advice. This is for educational and entertainment purposes only. What I can say that don't trust anybody. You should hire a professional so that they can help you. Hiring a CPA, hiring a lawyer. You will learn the business model for independent freight dispatchers. You also learn about the business model for the brokerage company. Now, let's talk about the brokers first. So there's a supply chain and there are members of supply chain. I'll keep it simple. Members is basically players. And again, why am I saying players? I want you to think about like business. It's like a game. Think about Monopoly. It's a board game, but then it's all about business, right? The things that you can do, you can't do, and then players, very important. Think of it that way because that will make sense. First, since we're talking about shippers, brokers, carriers, let's pull these members and let's talk about those. Let's talk about, for those of you who don't know, shippers basically think about manufacturers. Right? They're making, producing. Think about people who have loads. They made something, now they need logistics services, meaning they need to move this from point A to point B. Point A is I have these loads in my warehouse, I need to move them out. I sold them to who? To customer. Now this must move from my warehouse to the customer's warehouse. To me, as a shipper, it makes sense to work with carriers. So I'm a carrier and I have 5, 6, 7 trucks. Now it makes sense to work with these shippers. There's some middlemen comes into play. Who? Think about brokers. Brokers basically saying, hey, you own loads. I know you're really good at producing, just make stuff. What I'll do is that I will go and find carriers. Now, let's talk about the independent freight dispatchers. Carrier and independent freight dispatcher, it's like a team play. Carriers give them limited power of attorney. And a simple way of explaining this is basically carrier gives them limited power to use carrier's company. So then independent freight dispatcher, think about in a way, he or she becomes a carrier. Think about that way. If I'm an independent freight dispatcher, I'm contracting with the carrier and I sign the contract, I'm representing this carrier, but what's happening? I'm becoming a carrier. How? Because we bind it legally and because of this document, dispatcher carrier agreement. So we just agreed that carrier gave me the limited power of attorney to use his company. So now I'm using his company. I just became a carrier. Think about that way. It logically makes sense. You absolutely not 100% becoming a carrier, but now you are a carrier. Now, do you see brokers? They don't have the company. Brokers in this place, they can't see you as a competitor. One, you don't have an MC number. Two, you're representing a carrier. Simply, you are the carrier. The business models is basically how they operate their business. Broker coming into how many? 2 business models. One, maybe you guys heard of this. One business model, buy and sell model, also known as Chicago model. It will make sense in a minute when I start talking about the second business model. So buy and sell model for brokers, this is where I want you to think about like scale. Now, there is second business model. There's C2G model. C2G model is basically, I want you to think about start to finish model. Now, for a moment, let's switch and talk about independent freight dispatch since we're comparing them. And what's the goal? That there is no connection in between these. There's no competition. So brokers out there, just relax. We all friends. The business model for independent freight dispatchers, ready? Management/team model. And again, this will make sense in a minute, but think about it. If you're taking notes, it's very important. Brokers, buy and sell Chicago model, all about scale. C2G model, start to finish. One is quantity, the other one is quality, right? So independent freight dispatcher is management/team model. We'll be talking about the motivation behind each model. Now let's compare buy and sell or the Chicago model to C2G model, which is, and again, we're talking about brokers, their start to finish, the quantity and quality. Why buy and sell model? This is where the negotiation power comes in. This is where you need to learn as an independent freight dispatcher, as a carrier. So buy and sell model, why I said that it's all about scalability, it's all about scale, all about numbers, because they're like moving quickly. They're serving hundreds of thousands of carriers. They're serving hundreds of shippers. How they do that? Because they have army of people working inside the brokerage company. A lot of moving pieces. Imagine hundreds of people sitting over the phone, talking to carriers, talking to shippers. Can you imagine that? So then the marketing department, army of people, hundreds of people just focused on marketing side of the business. Can you imagine for a second, you have a brokerage company, operation side of the business, you have hundreds of people. Think about 300 people. So then think about the sales department, the people closing deals over the phone, hundreds of people. And then the marketing department, they have hundreds of people just marketing. All these three departments working 24/7, 365, nonstop. This is the process in it. This is all about numbers, scale. So think about when they post loads, buy and sell model brokers, very important. I could have just gone really quickly to the point, but I think you need to understand this and why you will make more money with this business model. I want you to think about if you're an independent freight dispatcher, maybe you're a broker, maybe you're a carrier, specifically carrier or independent freight dispatcher. Have you seen that a load and you're talking to broker or the brokerage company, they're nice, they're ready to go, they're fast, and they agree whatever you say. And usually this is where you get a lot of money from them. They usually make less money. Why? Scalability. Think about numbers, right? Even if they taking maybe $20 off of a load, loads must go. They don't sit and negotiate with you. They're serving hundreds of carriers, hundreds of shippers. I just want you to think that way, okay? When they post, you have the power. You make a lot of money. Then when it comes to C2G model, their start to finish, this is where the business model is. There's an owner and there will be a broker agent and maybe a couple of people that helping run the operation. This is where they serve less carriers and less shippers because they're limited. Although they can expand their business, but there is a disadvantage to this. They can lose the shippers. And how so? If I'm doing C2G model, and again, remember, it's from what? From start to finish. Meaning, if you are a shipper, then what I do, I just basically take your logistics from A to Z, from start to finish. So when these people post, since they're all about quality, they will be charging more and then they will stick, right, to the price point. For example, if there is a load coming from a shipper, ABC shipping services, for example, and then there's a broker and that load goes from Atlanta, Georgia to Houston, Texas for $5,000, and then brokers, okay, I can take that and I'll post for, I don't know, $3,800 or maybe $4K because this load must move. So then they will post a load And then carrier will be calling saying, hey, I'm not taking it for 3,800. Can you do 45? And they will, no, we can't do that. The most I can go, maybe I can add a couple hundreds. That's it. This is how you differentiate between good dispatchers and, let's say, professional dispatchers and beginners. So professional dispatchers, the only difference why they make more money, because they know how to identify C2G model and the buy and sell model. Maybe you don't know, maybe you puzzled, how come? Trust me, the people can identify them real quickly, and then they will be playing with them accordingly, meaning negotiate them accordingly. We talked about the structure, but then second, this is very important. I've seen debates, commissions, that it's illegal. When it comes to commission, and again, the whole point here is to learn about the business models. And one of the reasons why you want to learn is because you want to become a better negotiator, right? Better business owner. So the commission, everybody talks about commission. Brokers make commissions, independent freight dispatchers make commissions. And I say, no, dispatchers, they don't make commissions. And a lot of my students will confuse if they're watching right now. What are you talking about? You taught us that there will be a 6%, 10%, 15%, 20% charge. And this is how you craft your offer. And this is how you sell. This is how you market. And this is how we close the deal. Because if they buy the load and then they sell to the carrier, it's basically they are in the resale business. Shippers prefer working with brokers for one reason only. And there's one reason only, not two, not three, not 10, just one. What is it? Brokers simply, they have army of carriers. So think about, if I'm a broker, I have 600 carriers on my list. Okay, so if I post a load or email to my carriers, probability of booking that load is high. So broker comes between shipper and carrier, talking to a shipper, broker, and saying, hey, this load goes from point A to point B. So you are offering, I don't know how much, 4,000, something like that. Okay, so if you charge 4,000, then now let me find a carrier, and then it comes to the carriers and, hey, I have a load goes from Atlanta to Houston, Texas, and it pays 3,500. And the broker goes back to the shipper, says, hey, listen, there's a carrier willing to pick this load, but I want 4,000. I agree, give me that load, and then I'll take that load and then assign to the carrier. And load was 4,000, and then I dispatched for 3,800, and I keep the $200. So this is basically, how it works. And that $200 is the commission. I didn't buy and sell because it's a resell. So if the broker's commission based, what about independent freight dispatchers? Don't they charge percentage? Think about it. Independent freight dispatchers, they're not commission based. So what is it then? It's the profit sharing base. What's the motivation behind? If I'm an independent freight dispatcher, and if you guys out there, independent freight dispatchers, please confirm. What do? You want your carriers make more money. Why? Why you want that? Because if I'm a carrier, I make more money with you, then what you do? You at the same time making more money with me. I'll give you an example. I'm a carrier. I have independent freight dispatchers. Like, okay, this month we made $1 million gross revenue. Now what I'm doing? I'm sharing my profit with my team members, contractors. Because of my agreement, I'll be sharing 10% of this. Basically, the profit that I have, what's the percentage I'm taking out and giving away, so to speak, if that makes sense.